To order, April 2022, no, April 22nd, 2024, not 2022. And recognize that we are gathering on the unceded traditional territory of what is now known as the Comox Nation. And we are grateful for their grace and collaboration in all the work we do on their land. Could I have, well, you'll notice that one of our members is standing. Sometimes people at council have back issues, and we encourage them to come if they are able. And so Councillor Kettler may sit and stand and may move around somewhat to reduce pain. So just for your information.
Sitting's the new smoking, just so everybody knows.
Sitting is really bad. We should all be standing. Okay, and a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. An adoption of regular council meeting April 8th minutes.
Move the minutes. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And receive APC meetings from April 11th.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Excellent. Delegations. So Sergeant Kilbourne and Beauregard, come on up. You may sit or stand in whatever combination you'd like as well. Perhaps you've been sitting all day and you'd like to stand.
We have, yeah.
Good. Whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you.
for being here.
Staff sergeant, but no offense taken.
Oh, sorry.
Corey
I don't know
Kilbourne and
I
Troy.
wouldn't know which one was higher than the other
Okay,
anyway.
Troy Beauregard, we're equals.
Okay.
And Troy's the operations NCO at the detachment. And thanks for having us. I'm the acting detachment commander. I do have news to start out with. We have the new
good.
detachment commander. Should be in place sometime probably the middle of July. He just sold his house, so he'll be Inspector Scott Mercer.
Scott Mercer.
His
Okay.
name. He's coming from Alberta. So I'm sure we'll have him by to introduce him here at some point. If it's okay, I can just run through the report. Troy and I will intersperse with some what we think is our highlights or context, and then, but you're welcome to pause questions or take questions at the end,
Awesome.
however you'd like.
Thank you. Go for it.
Just the down arrow, did you say? Am I pointing at? Oh, there we go. So that first slide is the calls for service. Pretty much flat really over the last 5 years when you look at it. And just for context, the total calls for service in the detachment last year was 20,500, and that's in the calendar year. So we run some statistics in the calendar, and then the obviously our fiscal year is April to April. Some of the most common call types, you have, theft, check well-beings. The check well-beings could be anything from checking on your grandmother that hasn't answered the phone, or people that call from Ontario, hey, my mom's not picking up the phone. That's usually what those calls entail. Some property crime, disturbances, traffic incidences. And when we're going through these numbers, just one thing to note is that don't be afraid of the big percentage gains or decreases, because sometimes the numbers themselves aren't very large. So we'll try to provide a bit of context on that, but at least for the less serious offenses. And some of the most common call locations, we've got the mobile home park and the Waverly Hotel. Out of, if the most common place is 6 calls out of 700, I'm not sure if that would be like a high volume place. Not statistically significant. But that's how we break down the locations, just so we know where to focus our policing if it's necessary, and provide some information as to how we might do that. Violent crime is one of the most important ones we do. And so the violent crime is, overall, it's a little bit kind of all over the place. It's decreasing on the island in BC generally. So we're finding in the Comox Valley, it's not decreasing as much as in other areas. And so that's what we're trying to focus on. We have the repeat violent offender program that the province instituted, which we've got 8 or 9 offenders that are added to that list, and so some of them are in jail, some of them are going through court processes, but when they hit the enforcement phase, it's dedicated police, dedicated Crown Counsel to monitor these individuals with the theory that the highest end offenders commit the most crimes, and so that's where the focus is, and so that's an area that we're sort of looking to tackle on the downward trend. That goes by. The property crime is kind of one of the other big ticket items, I think, in all the communities. And again, it is lowering, but not relative to the most of the island and in BC. So I think it's still a serious issue, and you translate 16 thefts from vehicles in a town this size is still fairly significant, I would say. And it causes the citizens a lot of cost. You have your window broken and half the things taken out of your car. So some of these, the property crime and thefts is another area that we target with our prolific offenders. And we have a list of people that are sort of the high flyers offense-wise and try to target those people that are committing these kind of offenses.
Typically what happens when you see a blip like that, up or down, it means that somebody
It's gone
is
out.
back in town or they're in jail or away. So usually those blips come and go, glom onto them and then it goes away.
Yeah, and in a town this size, even one person can have a really big effect, if whether they're active or not active. It's so we try to really focus our efforts sort of where we can have the most impact. And there's just a map of the property crime by area, kind of focused around the main drags in a couple of the neighborhoods. And the files at Cumberland Lake Park and Cumberland Campground, pretty low. And that's just calls for service. We're still running our seasonal policing programs out there. And we just, we started an e-bike program actually with our bike unit. So we're going to be expanding that into some of the parks, and that'll increase our range for those guys. It's been a really effective pilot. We just started it actually last month. So we're having some pretty good success with that. And that's pretty much the end of our stats, and happy to take any questions or anything.
Council, questions?
Do you run on a different calendar year? It says fourth quarter data.
April to April.
April to April,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
So that's why we're in fourth quarter.
Yep, that's correct.
That makes sense.
And one thing I guess I can add at the end is we're actively working right now to sort of nail down our priorities for the year. And so all the communities, it's very common traffic, property crime, two of the big ticket items for most of the communities. And so what we do, and Troy does, is we try to identify activities with the consultation of our members. What can we do to attack those areas in keeping with your priorities, and try to sort of lower the incidences of those. So that's what we're trying to kind of nail down right now for the upcoming fiscal year.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's on our agenda for later
It is.
tonight, those priorities.
I had a question, actually.
Yeah,
Do
go
you- I noticed you don't really keep track of organized crime or anything like that. Is that?
Not specifically,
Not specifically.
but that would be reflected in the drugs and drug trafficking.
Okay.
And so those are all, and prostitution, those are all organized crime
Yeah.
activities. So we don't have too much of that up here, but there's a lot of drugs and drug trafficking, as you know,
Thank you.
everywhere.
Councilor Kettler.
Yeah, so we've been having some issues where we have felt that our bylaw officer has needed support from our CMP. Is that something that we should be adding to our priority list, or is that sort of something that's a regular occurrence anyway?
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be, I think the community priorities are basically overall what do the citizens of the town want us and you to tackle organizationally. So the big overarching priorities, something like that is, we'll always be there to back up the bylaw guides if they need assistance.
Okay.
So that's a case by case basis, but we're talking more of, like Corey mentioned, it's traffic concern, our youth, drugs, typically is what we see, priority offenders or violent offenders, things like that, right? Maybe domestic violence, things like those. And then what happens under those is we'll take each communities and we'll tailor it to each of you individually, the municipalities, and set sort of initiatives to have a positive impact on what the community wants.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and specific to bylaws, I know we've gone through an exercise in Courtney recently, just sort of changing how we work with the bylaws. So if something's not working to your liking, we can address it and sort of adapt, however you
Okay,
think would be most effective.
great. Good to hear. Thank you.
I have a question about the types of violent crime. So because sex offenses is under there, that wouldn't be internet crime because it's under violent
A lot of them is
crime, or
under
could
either
it
sex
be-
assault or extortion.
Okay, so it could be.
The sextortion is a huge trend right now everywhere. And we're seeing a lot of that online fraud, the colloquialism is the sextortion, but a lot of it looks similar.
And so that would be a special unit that you guys wouldn't be involved, we don't have that sort of expertise here. in
Our
the
major
valley.
crime unit takes on those investigations, and as
okay.
well, we have a special victims unit that does mainly domestic violence and child investigations, and so they take on some of those, because a lot of them, they deal with children.
And that is out of our detachment.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Yep, and if we were always working with our integrated units in headquarters, because they do provide us some additional capabilities for cell phone extractions and analysis and things like that. And so we have access to experts when we need them, but typically they're mostly in-house. We have some pretty good investigators there that are experienced in that type of thing.
Oh, that's awesome, okay. Any other questions?
I
Oh,
had
sorry,
one
you
that's
go ahead.
kind of outside. This is more of a cheerful one. So, you have a community liaison officer because we're going to have the annual Cumberland Soapbox Derby, and I don't know if you'd be interested in doing any outreach with the radar gun at the bottom of the hills, the kids speed down.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So that's
Send a request to Corey or I.
Okay.
and We'll make sure you're in touch with the right people.
I thought it would just be fun for the kids.
It would
Probably have a
be fun.
lineup to
Yeah.
volunteer.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you should get in the carts, though, and
not?
race.
Yeah.
Not against that guy.
They don't,
I don't bend as well as I used to.
potentially dangerous. One of the things we talked about when we talked about potential priorities at our last meeting was asking for increased frequency of cruising in the night, so late night or early morning. Is that something we could prioritize?
Yes, yeah.
Awesome. That seems to be when the mischief happens, you know?
Typically it is, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have anything else. Anybody else? No? Thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
And we look forward to you coming back with your new boss, I guess. And,
I don't think so.
and, and meeting with them as well. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks. And I think I reached out just to establish a bit more regular communication
Yeah.
with the town, and it'll be, I think, great to establish a little more sort of ongoing. And then once the new detachment commander comes, you can just continue on with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay. Correspondence, letter of support request, funding prioritization for treatment of medical detox beds. Does anybody want to speak to it, or does anybody have any questions about it? It's one of the suggested actions coming out of the substance use strategy, phase 1 or 2 or both. Definitely a dramatic need in the valley for more of those. Those people have to go to Nanaimo to get treatment. So there's a recommendation there. No, there isn't. So do you just want to know if we have general support for it? And we'll write the letter later. Do they want a letter?
There is on page 2 of the letter, there is a request that the Village of Cumberland provide a letter of support urging the Premier, the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and CMHA-BC to prioritize funding of treatment and medical detox beds in the Comox Valley. So if council would like to do that.
Do we have a mover?
I'll move that.
Thank you. And there's the seconder. All in favor? Thank you. Audited financial statements. Come on, is Annie and we get everybody? Just one? Corey, come on up.
We didn't talk about that more.
It just says prepared by Annie, but
Absolutely. Prepared
there's
for any.
more.
Sure, yeah.
She'll keep you company.
Annie's here for the hard questions.
That's right.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Madam
being
Mayor.
here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. My usual routine, once a year, come and talk to you about financial statements, different numbers than we just saw. Again, a big thank you to Annie and Michelle and staff throughout the village for going through the audit process with us this year. It always goes very smoothly. We'll get into some details and things. There's some new things that we went through this year, and I really want to just say thank you for all the effort and support that they give. Okay, there we go. All right, I'll get the technology. So I'll take you through some of the financial statement highlights, talk a little bit about the audit and the audit results, and then, as I've done in the past years, end on a little bit of financial analysis and numbers again. A reminder that what I'm going to go through tonight and what you've got in the financial statements in your package is the consolidated financial statements. So all the funds together, the general, water, sewer, capital, reserves. When you're getting staff reports throughout the year, you might get one specific piece, operating or other things. We're bringing it all together tonight and look at the year from that overall perspective. So, sorry, I'm going to flip here. My eyesight's okay, but staring at computers all day just makes it worse and worse and worse. So starting with the statement of financial position, or the balance sheet, at the end of 2023, the village had cash and investments of $25.6 million, so up from the $22 million in the prior year. If you add the receivables in at the end of the year, you get just over $28 million of cash and receivables. Debt being paid down on schedule is down to $8.4 million. And total liabilities have ticked up a little bit to 18.4. So there are some new liabilities in there that I'll get into on the next slide. If you subtract those liabilities off of your financial assets, you get what we call the net financial asset position. So with that increase in cash and investments, that net financial asset position has increased to $9.6 million at the end of the year. Tangible capital assets being managed by the village is $75.8 million. So that's your road, water, sewer, infrastructure, buildings, and equipment. And then the accumulated surplus at the end of the year is $85.7 million on an accounting basis. And I will show you in a future slide what's in that number. So I mentioned some new things this year. One of the new numbers on your financial statements is this asset retirement obligation balance. So this is a new accounting standard to look at all the costs of remediation or cleanup on assets that you're currently managing, right? So asbestos in the walls is the low-hanging fruit there. There's another one, well decommissioning. Those are some of the things we looked at. We went through a really comprehensive conversation. You had a consultant come in and go through that as well. We picked at the consultant's report. We talked about, what else could be out there to give ourselves comfort that there isn't anything major missing here, right? So at the end of the year, $261,889. That's not a large number. That is an estimated liability for future costs. You can't exactly nail down when you're going to do some of that asbestos cleanup, but it'll be as you, do a renovation or do a significant building project. This number will change. Either changes in regulations can cause new liabilities to come on. If there's something that changed around your sewer lagoons or other types of assets that you're managing, we might see this change. Changes in cost estimates, this number is always going to be refined. The consultant did a great job going through estimates of square footage and what it might cost. But if you got into a remediation project or a renovation, then you would have actual engineer reports and we would adjust the number at that point. And things like inflation, interest rates, as they change, they will skew the way this number is calculated. On the income statement or the statement of operations, total revenues for the year were $17.4 million. You can see that's up from the 13.3 that was budgeted. So things like the Growing Communities Fund that came in early in the year from the province, not in the budget and plan because it was a bit of a surprise for most communities. On the expense side of things, $9.5 million of total expenses, almost exactly on budget for the year of what was expected. So an accounting surplus of $7.8 million at the end of the year. Now I say accounting surplus because we've got lots of adjustments in there. We're doing things with deferrals and receivables and payables. To unwind that, I like to look at what happened in the main bank accounts and the cash flows. So regular operations during the year brought in $9.8 million. There's $6.4 million of capital spending. $8.8 million was transferred from the out of investments into the main bank accounts to pay for some of those capital purchases. You had new debt of $704,000 for some of the capital projects as well, and repaying the debt on schedule is $786,000. So the main bank accounts had a net cash inflow of $12.2 million for 2023, versus you can see in 2022 there was a 4.6 outflow. Promised I would explain what's in that $85 million of accumulated surplus. Most of it, $67 million, is what we call the equity in the capital assets. So that's the value of all the infrastructure on the books, the depreciated cost, minus the debt that you're still carrying. $16 million is set aside in reserves, and the operating fund has a $2 million surplus. It's down a little bit from the prior year, but holding at $2.1 million. Switching gears, going to the audit process and the audit findings, we're happy to be providing what we call an unqualified audit opinion. That's a clean audit opinion. We're satisfied that the financial statements that you have in front of you are prepared accurately in all material respects in accordance with local government standards. Ready to sign the report after council approval and completion of a few minor things. We always check in with legal counsel at the close to today and make sure there's no hidden liabilities or any unusual things floating around out there. When we're going through our audit, we start by looking at the controls. Make sure that you're getting accurate financial reporting. Are the controls designed effectively to safeguard your risks? Are they implemented? We don't specifically test are they effective. So we don't test throughout the year if they're operating all the time. But that's just an audit efficiency approach. So we sample transactions. We don't look at every transaction. And to do our audit work, we use this number of materiality. So this is calculated as a percentage of your annual revenues. It was $700,000 for 2023. So we're looking at every transaction at or above $700,000. That's your big capital grants, your big capital payments, tax requisition. And then below that dollar value, we're sampling to give ourselves comfort over the financial statements. We didn't find any unusual items to report back to council, no evidence of conflict of interest or unusual transactions or payments. If we did find something in the course of our audit, I would be required to report it out to you, and usually we request an in-camera meeting at that point to discuss sensitive matters. So nothing to report is a good news piece there. Again, a big thank you to staff for all assistance with the audit. I'll confirm our independence. We have to be independent and not do any other projects or any other work throughout the whole year and all the way up to today. And then I'll wrap up by looking at some of those ratios that we've looked at for the last few years. The first one we like to look at is what we call the sustainability ratio. So it's really looking at your liquid assets, your cash and receivables, and comparing them to your liabilities. If it's above 1, you've got reserves put aside to pay for future projects. If it dips below 1, that means you are taxing or charging the residents for past transactions. So you can see there, it's been fluctuating. In 2019, it was a 1.23 down to 1.10, and then it's starting to climb again in 2022 and 2023, and it's up to 1.52, the highest it's been in the last 5 years. So that's showing some of those reserves set aside and some of those cash. It also shows things like, the Growing Communities Fund, if it's not all fully spent, that it's sitting there as cash ready for future projects. And then the last one we look at is, we call it flexibility, but it's really a question of inflexibility. How much is your infrastructure and the assets that you're managing impacting what you can do with your financials and the financing available? So we look at the infrastructure, the depreciated value, compare it to the original cost to get a rough idea of the aging. That doesn't include condition assessments or when you would do any of the work. It's just sort of how old is it. And you can see there it's been holding steady at about 72% for the last 5 years. Now it's holding steady because you've had some significant capital projects over the last few years, both with the fire hall, wastewater treatment plant, all those things. That's going to hold the line, right? When you start to see it declining, that's where assets are starting to getting old and you haven't had that capital. But with the capital renewal over the last few years, you're holding steady at about 72%. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening to the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions from council.
So just noting that we did build a new building, which is an excellent building, but none of the other buildings we own got any better. maybe some duct tape and stuff. I don't know. I'm not
Absolutely.
exactly sure, but yeah, those existing buildings. So that does raise the percentage, but in a practical
Yeah.
way. Not
And important to know that when we
Not
looked
really.
at the value of the tangible capital assets you have there, that's the historic cost of
Right.
decades and decades
Yeah, yeah.
of cost. To do replacement on everything you're managing would be 8 to 10 times what it is on the books right now. So yeah, that's a really good point. A couple new buildings and a big new project compared to everything else, that's why that's a very rough estimate
Yeah.
there. The condition assessments and the asset management plan are another key
the
piece of
best.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questions? Anybody?
The net financial assets up $3 million, is that the Growing Communities Fund landing in the bank account, basically?
Yep, that's part of it, although there's some unspent portion, so that wouldn't totally be all netted away there.
I think most of them are spoken for now.
Yeah, the earmarked right. The other thing would be, with money that you have in investments, the interest rates are really good, so you had a really good investment earnings, which is not fully budgeted, right? It wasn't, for most communities, the investment returns were stronger than the plan, with the interest rates coming up, so some of that is put aside as well. And that factors into that increase in the net financial asset position.
Awesome. Can I ask one while you find your next one?
Yep.
So the materiality seems hot. Well, I'm just I'm curious how you determine that, because if we just looked at, the revenue that the village generates in and of itself from its services, without the major grants we get for capital projects and stuff like that, the materiality would be much lower. But because we get these huge grants for big projects, it's skewing it in some way. Is that factored in some way, or?
It is. Thank you. That's a great question. What we do is we normalize the income. So we take your income every year, the revenues that you're getting, and we take out those big grants. We took out the Growing Communities grant to try and get to what's a normal, because otherwise it would be up
Yeah.
on when you have a huge capital grant and coming back down. So we try and keep it level. You've got some level increases, some sort of slow and steady increases. We factor that in and pull out those big one-off items to get rid of that variability. And then the other thing there is it's roughly 5% of your annual revenue is the number we're using. The range of 3 to 5
Yeah.
is the allowable range. We're very comfortable at the higher end because we've got a good history of working with you and lots
Yeah.
of good, accurate results. So that's sort of how we're calculating it. And yeah, absolutely normalizing, adjusting out those unusual items
Okay.
so we don't have those swings.
Awesome. Thanks. Councilor Therrien, did you have another one?
No, I think most of my other questions are for when we get to the quarterly report.
Okie dokie. Anybody else have questions for Corey? Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks
Madam
so
Mayor.
much for coming. And thanks for the good, solid report and the vote of confidence.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Just
And
a
now
quick
we-
thanks to all the staff as well. It was a very
Yeah.
smooth audit. The finance staff made note that everything the auditors asked for, it was really easy to find. Things were really well put together, and it went well. So
Nice. It does take a lot of staff time to help an auditor, so, yeah, thanks. Okay, climate action plan, is that where we are? Yep. Hello, Karen. And we have people on Zoom as well, on screen. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Hello, Zoom land.
Hello. As long as everything's working, I guess we can get started. Should I just
Yeah.
jump right in?
I'll just
Or-
quickly introduce the project.
Okay.
and
Thanks,
then,
Karen.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And good to be here today and provide you an update with the Climate Action Plan project. As you know, we started it late last fall with the consultants visiting the village, doing some site visits, and then had consultations with the first round of consultations in February to get ideas for possible climate actions, understand what the priorities of the community are, and in the meanwhile, the consultants also reviewed greenhouse gas emissions, inventoried emissions, and modeled the emissions. And now we're at the point where they have a proposed set of actions that we want to run by you for your input if you wish. And then those proposed actions will go to community for a last round of consultations and input in we have open house scheduled on May 2nd, and then a noon hour online one on May 7th. So, but yeah, with that, I'll just turn it over to the consultants, and they'll present on the where they're at and their research and the proposed actions.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Hopefully everybody can see the screen okay. So I will continue onward. So my name is Lexi Ralph, and I'm with the consulting group Morrison Hershfield. We've recently been acquired by Stantec, so now we are Stantec. And I am the primary climate consultant working on this project, and I am pleased to also introduce my esteemed colleague, Nick. Do you want to say a few words, Nick?
Well, hi. Well, hello, everybody. Obviously, I know many of you well, and I've been pleased to have been asked to work together with Morrison Hershfield and the Community Energy Association, who've also been partners on this project, to act particularly for the engagement and local context for this project.
Great, thanks. Yeah, this is very apropos. I'm glad we're able to come here today for Earth Day. I think there's a good connection there. So we'll quickly run through where we've come from and where we are now, and then we'll launch right in and give you a fairly high-level overview of what we have put together, and then we'll welcome any questions. So to date, we've gone through a standard development process for putting the plan together. We've undertaken analysis and assessment of various risks and conditions, identified several draft actions, modeled the potential impact of those actions, and then put together a draft climate action plan, which is now with Karen and team for review. And all along the way, we've had a variety of points of contact with stakeholders, so we've had lots of input, and as Karen mentioned, we've got another engagement session in a week's time, May 2nd, and then there'll be a lunchtime session on May 7th. So all of that has allowed us to collect the information we need to put together the climate action plan, which covers two broad scopes. One is looking at emissions reduction, which is we sometimes refer to as mitigation, and the other side is really looking at climate change preparedness and adaptation. So the combination of those two is sort of that sweet spot. So when we can find actions that both mitigate climate change and adapt to it, that's the ideal. So the plan does address that low carbon adaptation as well, resilience. The plan itself has pretty broad purview. We include both corporate emissions and adaptation actions as well as community ones. So we're looking at all of the different aspects and trying to identify any opportunities that need implementation starting right away to address any urgent needs, as well as a longer-term implementation schedule, which is not part of the public-facing plan, but we've put some ideas together as sort of a Gantt chart for staff to reference, and that's under review right now. And I think the overarching theme that we want to talk about today is that it's really a partnership is going to be required, so it's not something that can all be done in a vacuum. Obviously, there are a lot of players who are working on this, and everybody has to take a role in some sense in order to make sure that we're successful. So that's our overarching theme. We'll come back to that. Is that it really does take a village and beyond. So what we wanted to provide as an overview today is that we've identified these core focus areas for identifying where actions can actually be undertaken. And so within each of these focus areas, buildings and energy, transportation, land use, waste, parks and environment, community and health, and governance, we have identified several goals. And then aligned with each goal, we have a fairly broad set of implementation actions that will address both emissions reductions as well as climate change adaptation and preparedness. And so today we'll look at just some of the high-level ones, really the big moves, but there are a number of additional ones, and they're included in the hard copy of this presentation and also in the plan document. But today we really just wanted to touch on some of the higher-level ones. And the staff does have some more information about phasing recommendations that would align with those. So as we mentioned before, the plan includes both that mitigation side and the adaptation side. And I will pass it over to Nick to talk a little bit about the GHG reduction and mitigation.
Thank you, Lexi. All right. Well, we began by really here on by looking at what one call an inventory, the sources of carbon emissions, and how that's expected to change over time if we effectively do what one might term business as usual. And what this means is we take into account population growth and any known legislative changes, and we look at the way that carbon emissions are built up from different contributory mechanisms like solid waste, transportation, buildings, and other elements. What we see here is a noticeable upward trend due to, if we don't change anything, due to the population, and a key thing here that's built in. You'll see that passenger vehicle emissions tail away. That's due to the expected federal mandate for electric vehicles. So known regulation like that is taken into account, but we're here to talk about what else we need to do. And the targets that we are recommending are in alignment with both national and international Paris Agreement targets, a 45% reduction of carbon emissions by 2030, and 100%, often termed net zero, by 2050. And these are obviously aggressive and tough targets that the world is beginning to commit to. So that actually bumps up against an important factor, which is what do we have control and influence over? We should recognize our scope of action. So in a municipality, as we know, one of the major activities of a municipality is land use planning and building codes. And then we have some influence over local transportation infrastructure. The way we manage our natural spaces and the sort of green natural services we can derive from those, and the village assets themselves. We've got potential to have some influence over the federal and provincial legislation. We may be able to advocate and join others in advocating for the right action. Waste management's another example of that, with CVRD managing that service. Technologies will change and develop, and there's a lot of really interesting technological development that's going to help address these problems coming forward. And of course, individual community members. Individual action is not enough, but it must also happen, and we can work to support and encourage our friends and neighbours to take part. Externally, there's some large sources that we have really pretty much no control over as a municipality. The use of fossil fuels in aviation and marine transportation, industrial production, commercial distribution, and many other factors. Lexi. So recognizing that, this is a chart that models the impact of the recommendations we have in the plan. And we'll talk about what those are or what those big moves are in a moment, but we wanted to show you this overall trajectory. The colored bars at the top are the expected emissions that will not happen because of the actions we're proposing. And the gray is what remains. And what you'll probably notice quite quickly is that from today through 2050, that gray bar it dips a little bit, comes up, but it doesn't end up changing a great deal yet. And that's back to this point we made about that work needs to be done at the international, national, and provincial level. The heartening story here is that with what we believe is a realistic plan, we can make a difference, a reduction of almost 25 to 30% of the expected emissions. So we definitely have a role to play. That role is significant. And as other jurisdictions and individuals play theirs, then we can get there together. So let's actually talk about what some of those actions are in broad scope. I forget exactly how many we have, Lexi, but it must be pushing 80 or 70 or 80 actions, I think, in there. But let's just look at the top levels. In terms of buildings and energy, at what we call the corporate level, the action that the Corporation of the Village of Cumberland can take. There's proposals for village heating system upgrades in the buildings, effectively to reduce or eliminate the use of natural gas over this 30-year time frame. And then in the community, by far the biggest impact that can be had is as rapid as possible encouragement of retrofits of existing buildings, insulation, glazing, electrification, heat pump, and other activity for both residential and commercial buildings. The federal program has been extremely helpful for that. We'll all hope that extends, and I know that the village is engaged in the sort of concierge advice program as well, and help people walk through some of these schemes. And there's also the adoption for new buildings of a zero carbon step code. I think many of us will know of the energy step code. This is slightly different. BC has two different step codes, but it's a similar concept. But there are steps towards zero carbon, and we're recommending the adoption of a relatively aggressive step and a program that moves forward to mean that new buildings are zero carbon in operation. I'm also suggesting that that's done in concert with Courtney Comox and the CVRD, so that the whole area is acting as one, and that the industry and the building and development industry will come to know and understand that all in this area are adopting the same standards. In terms of transportation, at the corporate level, we're developing a green fleet policy. We're reviewing that with staff right now. For village vehicles. We also have recommendations around EV infrastructure, effectively encouraging the further development of a charging infrastructure, and also ensuring that, for example, any apartment buildings that are built or of a multifamily are set up to easily provide the relevant charging infrastructure in the future as electrification of the fleet proceeds. There's also the existing transportation master plan, pushing towards lower carbon alternatives. That's already work that's well underway. Active transportation, more cycling and more walking, and making that easier, including things like the cycle route all the way to Courtney. On the waste side, continuing to work with the CVRD, the CV Waste Management Centre, really to promote and ensure maximum diversion of any organic or composting materials. This is all about landfill gas, the generation of gas in the landfill, because of the high potency of methane in greenhouse gas. And so that needs to continue and accelerate. And those are the big moves on the emission reduction side.
Great.
And I think, Lexi, is that you now?
Yep, and I'll talk a little bit about the climate preparedness side. Just got a few slides here. So we did a climate risk assessment of the village, including the community and corporate sides, and identified the top climate risks related to the primary hazards that we look at across the province. And this is primarily related to extreme heat, extreme precipitation and flooding, and wildfire smoke. There are a few others, but those are the ones that are the most critical that we're seeing in terms of increasing frequency, intensity, or duration over the next 20 to 50 years. And so from those, these are the top risks that we identified. So on the infrastructure side, looking at the potential impact on cooling systems from high heat events like the heat dome a few years ago, potential damage to infrastructure from extreme heat or wildfire. On the health side, heat-related illness and respiratory issues due to wildfire smoke were identified. On the environment side, looking at wildfire damage primarily to forested areas and parks, as well as water quality and quantity implications, especially in terms of drought or extreme heat events. And then when we think about services, then we consider that we might be seeing a lack of access to those services or any recreational areas. There might be some disruption to tourism, especially if there is extreme flooding or even high wind events or fires. So those are the top risks that we identified. There were some additional ones that we've also considered. We're just giving you a synopsis in this presentation. And so the big moves that we identified for adaptation or climate preparedness were these, which is really on the building side, thinking about designing to future climate conditions. Building codes generally do design to historical conditions, which are no longer relevant and do not position us well for the future. So new buildings need to be designed with a future-looking consideration, and the Zero Carbon Step Code will have some of that included in it as well. So that is one of those items that checks the box on both the adaptation and mitigation side. For parks and environment, looking at really promoting green infrastructure, preserving what we have, improving it even further, looking at wherever we can to identify opportunities for green infrastructure and preserving natural assets. Community and health side, really thinking about emergency management planning with that future outlook, understanding that it is going to continue to become a problem, all of these different hazards. So we need to make sure that everything is in place for rapid response to continue to keep the community safe. And then on the governance side, making sure that there is continued oversight of this plan and monitoring the progress, and then considering climate change in all decision making going forward. Those are the big moves. So they may seem like they're self-evident, but making sure we've identified them here, articulating them, we thought was really important. And then, as Nick mentioned, there are lots of more detailed actions within the plan itself. So the key takeaways are that this plan does include both the GHG reduction and climate preparedness. There are items in both, and we can't forget one and just focus on the other. A lot of them are combined. And the big moves are the ones we identified today, and those will have the highest impact, but we have a lot more listed, and some of them are easy, and the small moves do matter. We need to really think about all of them, especially if we want to move the needle on the emissions reduction. And we have identified a number of actions that should be started right away. I mean, this is Earth Day number 54, and we're still addressing a lot of the same issues that we've been talking about for 54 years, and we're running out of time. So urgent action is required on a number of these, and that is identified within the plan, at least on the staff side. The public-facing one doesn't have as much of that implementation and phasing identified. And as Nick mentioned, the village does have a variety of different levels of control and influence, but everybody is making progress at all levels of government and community and across the world. And we need to remember that we're moving forward, and that it does take a village. We need to all work together. So that is the summary that we wanted to present today. So with that, I think we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Council, questions?
I just had one of the questions. When you're taking account into retrofitting buildings, I take it you're also looking at the climate costs of those things as well, or would that be accurate? I mean, one of the things when you have reconstruction of something, you're actually using more materials, and you tend to create a footprint by the very process of construction. Is that something that's accounted for within that?
Our modeling doesn't take into account that embodied carbon approach, because it's very difficult to calculate that if we don't know what we're looking at. But that is a consideration I know our team looks at in all of our projects, and it is something to consider. The greenest building is one that's still standing. So a lot of what we're looking at for retrofits is on the HVAC side. Really removing fossil fuel burning equipment. So if you've got furnaces that are gas fired or oil fired, retrofitting those with electric heat pumps is kind of the key strategy right now. So we'd be looking more at that than necessarily retrofitting or ripping down an entire building if it's not necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the report.
And then I also noted that you had the deconstruction, the waste diversion in there as well, which would be the other end of, if you do take a building down, please don't throw it in the garbage. Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, thanks for the report. I have a couple questions. I guess first is a comment about the feedback from the community. There was a lot of great ideas in there, and I guess to your point at the end about, you know, small things mattering as well. How we can sort of capture some of those really great ideas that the community has put forward.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great comment. And we have taken the feedback from the engagement sessions and incorporated it into the plan. So we have 70 or 80 different actions, and some of them are smaller, and quite a few of them are the onus is really on community members to partner with the village and put their best foot forward and start to get involved. So I think that it was great to see how many people came to the engagement session that we had last time and how excited people are about getting involved and how much is already happening. And so a lot of, I think what can be really beneficial is capturing that energy and making sure that people know that everybody's working on this already and how can we continue to promote those collaborations. So I think we've tried to capture quite a few of them within the plan.
Awesome. I guess along those lines, we have some fairly new provincial funding, LGCAP, for climate, and I don't think, you know, as council, we've really thought about it strategically yet. We've allocated some of those funds, but you know, I think in the future we would want to be more strategic about that. And I was wondering if you guys have any ideas on how we could do that better.
Funding sources are identified in the plan too, and there's a lot of options. So there is information in there, and we can certainly elaborate on that as needed to make sure that it's totally applicable to what we want to be doing. So without getting into details, because I honestly don't want to say the wrong thing, we have an entire section on funding. Does that help?
And did I hear, Jesse, that you were also asking about allocation of existing funding like LG Cap and that piece, and the actions are to some degree prioritized. Obviously, it's a complex mix, but both in time frame and otherwise. So that will give some steer to how to allocate those resources.
Great, thank you.
I just want to say thank you guys. I share the APC's concerns about the cost prohibitiveness of this whole thing moving forward, but as Councillor Kettler mentioned just now, but we can't afford not to move forward. So I really thank you for your time. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, similar. Thank you, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing the report and getting to work on implementing some of this, especially the future proofing of the town. That's, I think, going to be the most important part.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's lots of great information in here, and looking forward to the next two engagement sessions, which are, I'm going to say them again, if somebody reminds me, May 3rd and May 7th?
May 2nd. May 2nd.
Sorry, May
evening.
2nd and
Yep.
May 7th. For those of you who haven't had your input yet.
And online till the 11th, I think.
Okay, I can add
Yeah,
to this
Karen will
maybe. Yeah,
put
so
that
May
out.
2nd is in person. That's a Thursday here from, I think it was 4:30 to 7. And then there is an online event for those who can't come but want to participate on Tuesday, May 7th from 12 to 1. And then there's also there'll be the actions will be posted on our engagement website, engagement platform at Comox Valley, Engage Comox Valley /Cumberland, for people who can't come to either to provide comment. And that's
Okay.
between May 1st and May 10th.
Okay, so there's a mechanism for people to put comments in through Engage.
Yeah.
Comox Valley.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or anything on that? Okay. So there's a recommendation there. It's just
I move that council receive the presentation by Alexi Ralph, practice lead Morrison Hirschfeld, now Stantec, and Nick Ward on the proposed climate actions.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Awesome. Thanks so much for moving this forward.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Province of BC referral request on a notice of work for Mines Act permit, 441 Memorial Road and 4135 Comox Valley Parkway. Hi, Seamus.
Good evening. All right, so just get that started there. So good evening, Mayor and Council. So the purpose of my report today is to present a referral from the province of British Columbia regarding a mine extraction permit at 4441 Memorial Way and 4135 Comox Valley Parkway. I note in the staff report it does note Memorial Road, but it is Memorial Way, so apologies for the oversight. So just for some background, so the province did refer this mine permit amendment to us, and the mine in question is Cumberland Sand and Gravel's gravel extraction pit just down the road there. The province initially issued their mine permit in 1991 and amended the permit in 1997 to further facilitate gravel extraction on the property. And the purpose of today's amendment is to further expand the pit that's closest to the Memorial Way side of the property, as well as mine across the property line between the Memorial Way side of the mine, as well as the mine on the other side on Comox Valley Parkway. So as this is a provincial matter, the village doesn't have regulatory authority over provincial mine permits, so we can't require development permits to be taken out to do the work, but we can provide comment based on village bylaws. So under our staff review, the following items were observed. So under the official community plan, we do designate areas for sand and gravel extraction, and the property at 4135 Comox Valley Parkway is designated for sand and gravel extraction, while 4441 Memorial Way is not. It is noted that operations do precede the designations in the official community plan. The property at 4441 Memorial Way is within Development Permit Area 1 for environmental protection, and work appears to encroach in an area mapped as a wetland on our mapping system. Now, while no environmental report was provided as part of this referral, staff will be recommending to the province that a qualified environmental professional be involved to confirm wetland boundary and any applicable environmental interventions. The property is also mapped as containing an aquifer. However, it is outside our development permit area 2 for aquifer protection. A basic water management plan was provided as part of the referral. However, it doesn't provide any details on aquifer protection. So staff will be recommending that a professional investigate the water table and ensure measures are taken to protect groundwater quantity and quality. Both properties are zoned to permit gravel extraction, and we have referred the matter to the development review team, which is our internal development review committee, for comment, and some comments were observed about gravel maybe being dragged onto the road, so we'll be recommending that measures be taken to avoid gravel being dragged off the property. So today we're presenting this to council as an opportunity to provide comment on the referral. So any comments that council makes will be put in the letter that we'll be forwarding to the province. Alternatively, council also has the opportunity to simply receive the report for information and not provide comment. So that's the end of my verbal report, and I welcome your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Seamus. Questions?
One of these is the comment more than anything. It's just given the proximity to our cemetery there. If the applicant, one of the things that I think we'd like to see are dust control measures, and I mean, it's going to be, you can't help with the noise necessarily, but just maintaining that buffer between the municipal cemetery and the gravel extraction would be important, including dust mitigation measures as they're hauling through there.
Okay.
I know it's near and dear to a lot of folks in the community, and you can imagine having a sensitive event in the cemetery and clouds of dust and that sort of thing rolling in might put a bit of a damper on that. So,
okay.
Not that it would be fun in the first place, but you get my point.
Councillor Kettler?
I seem to recall that there may have been an encroachment previously. Is this an attempt to bring a previous encroachment up to standard, I guess?
So when you say encroachment, do you mean across, like mining across the property line?
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm not sure. Just based on the information provided, it does look like it's new excavation.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in the referral that said it was to resolve a previous encroachment.
Okay. And with the water, you said that we were going to request that an expert give us some information about the water table before any work's done.
That's correct. Yes. So we'll be making the request to the province. So since we don't have the authority to request it ourselves, we'll be making the recommendation that the province request that information.
Great. And I guess the last thing was, I'm not sure where the proposed trail for the Cumberland Courtney connector is going to go, but it would be good to talk to them about that and their business plans and whether that aligns with our active travel transportation plans as well. Yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Councillor Kettler covered most of my concerns. Yeah.
So I'm still trying to figure out where Memorial Way is, because I don't see it anywhere. And so there's two maps attached on page 104 and 105. And so the colored blobs are existing extraction, or is that the proposed extraction? I'm having a hard time understanding the maps. Or are they planning to extract that entire area inside the red?
And that's correct. It's the areas that are inside the red that are going to be extracted.
That's an enormous amount of material and trees coming down. Yeah. All the way from the Parkway to Highway 19, past Maple Lake. So, and we know there's aquifers there, and we know there's wetlands in there.
If I may interject and just clarify. So if we're looking at the map on page 104, so the orange and yellow areas are the areas that are going to be extracted upon, and it's just the area that's outlined in red is the property boundary.
So okay, so right now the two colored blobs are what they're taking.
Correct. Yes.
I know that's super technical language. The two colored blobs. But potentially they could come back for another, but they would have to apply again to do more within that property boundary. Yes.
And that's correct. Yes. So yeah, the nature of this amendment is just what's in the colored areas.
Yeah. So yeah, Councillor Kettler outlined concerns about the aquifer and the existing wetland. I'm not sure. I mean, it would be good to know what the rules from the province are around that. Like, could they just wipe out that whole wetland as potentially has already happened with the other ones? Yeah. There's also in the application.
While you're looking, can I just follow up with the wetland part? So once they do, I guess if they follow our advice and get a review done of the aquifer, do we get that information back, or is there a way for us to also receive that?
So like if they do get a QEP involved, qualified environmental professional, can we get a copy of that report?
Exactly.
I'd have to check with the province, because I know what'll happen is whatever comment we make, they may make that into because in the mine permit they provide conditions like we would with like a development permit or a variance. They would potentially condition that as a condition of the mine permit, that if the QEP outlines something, then they may be expected to follow these regulations. So, but to the point of, will we get a copy of that QEP report, we would have to ask the province.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is might be outside of your wheelhouse or so, but just regarding liabilities, is the village on the hook, given the amount of properties downstream from that who rely on well water, especially along Minto Road there, and I notice the applicant lives on Minto Road as well. Are we liable, say, if there's a major fuel spill or something from that, or is there anything that the village has to worry about from that point of view? Or would that be completely under their under the extraction company's purvey?
Well, I would say my understanding is that as we're only a referral agency and we're not giving any approvals, that there isn't that risk.
Okay. I'm just curious.
So the other thing I wanted to point out that I think would be appropriate for us to provide in feedback is the fact that they have not engaged with our local First Nation. And it would seem that there's a responsibility to do that. But the application just says no, they haven't. And given the potential impact on the aquifer and the adjacent lands, I think that's probably should happen. And then the other thing is because if I'm understanding this correctly, the initial permit, is that what it is? Yep, work system and permit was done in 1991 and then updated in 1997. And the security that is on file is $10,000, which wouldn't restore a pothole, using a local example. So that is a concern. So and also the permit says that they're supposed to be continually and progressively reclaiming the land. So I'm curious about what that looks like, because there's an awful lot of bare land that's been mined that's still there, and as they expand, so when you expand, when does that reclamation, when's that supposed to start? It's been 27 years
Okay.
since the permit
Okay.
was issued.
Wait,
And I'll just stop there. Anybody else? No. Okay.
All right. So is that the end of the comments?
Yeah. Do you want us to try and say all that in a succinct way, or did somebody capture that as we were going along?
I captured it mostly while we were going along, but if I can just have one big summary, I'll make sure we get it all accounted for and into the provincial
Yeah, so just noting the wetlands on the property and the shallow aquifer in that whole area and looking for an aquifer report, status report, or like baseline. And Comox First Nation referral. And reclamation plans, and whether the deposit that the province is holding, I assume the province is holding that deposit of $10,000, whether they feel that's sufficient for reclaiming an enormous, I don't know what the math is on that land, but you would on the property as a security.
And then dust
And
control.
dust attenuation.
And the
just
dust control, yeah.
measures around the cemetery.
And then I was hoping for the direction to staff on our active transportation.
Right, on the route.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask for clarification on that active transportation route comment? I certainly know from a business to village level, we'd want to understand any plan, what the traffic volume increase might be, and that might feed into decisions about the connector. In terms of referring, do you have a comment about it that would go in the referral response to the province?
Right, to the province. That right now, I guess that it's at the top of our list as a possible active transportation route. And so considerations need to be made for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think, and that would also connect with what Seamus was mentioning, we were going to include in the referral from staff, a response from staff about reducing the amount of gravel that migrates off-site. It would connect with that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Great.
Is there a motion there? Yeah, there is. There's a recommendation.
Feedback.
Just
I think
feedback.
we gave it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 7.4, cannabis retail use policy and regulation review.
I'm going to recuse myself for this report.
Oh, thank you, Counselor. We'll knock when you can come out. Does he need to? Oh, sure. Sean, come back and vote first.
Well, we know it works.
So
we
we
aren't
just
done.
want to, vote.
vote on that last
the
motion.
Feedback. All in favor of the feedback we've provided? Unanimous. Okay.
Thank you.
Now we're good. Cannabis.
He did.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'll stand up.
That he manages the cannabis store. One of the two. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a report on the cannabis retail use policy and regulation review. The purpose is to outline the review we have done of village policy and regulation for cannabis retail sales 6 years after a regulatory framework was adopted by council. And the timing is good right now. It's just in advance of expiration of the 2 temporary use permits for cannabis retail sales. They come up for expiry in 2025 and 2026. So in 2018, cannabis retail sales and consumption for recreational use was legalized. And earlier that year, in anticipation of the legalization, council adopted policy number 9.5, cannabis retail sales, and amended the zoning bylaw and business license bylaw to further regulate cannabis retail sales. And based on a recent temporary use permit application for cannabis retail, staff identified various elements in this policy that are no longer relevant or are contrary to legislation or are duplicated in other village bylaws. As a result, staff recommends the policy be amended to remove these elements, which are further discussed in the report. And a revised draft policy is included as attachment number 1, and the recommendation is that council adopt that revised policy today. As well, when cannabis retail was first legalized, many local governments set a business license fee for this use higher than for other uses, anticipating there'd be staff resources, excessive resources that would be required for monitoring and enforcement. And this report also presents considerations for review of business license fees, although that's not recommended for a decision tonight. But if council has any early input that would help in the development of further future report to council, we welcome that tonight. So, just a few things I would like to highlight. One is that the policy includes a request for proposals process by which 2 operators were selected originally. And the 2 selected retail outlets opened in 2019. True Green Cannabis is one and is still operating under its renewed temporary use permit. And the other original operator closed, which left 1 retail outlet. There was only 1 retail outlet operating in the village for approximately 3 years until Stick and Stone Cannabis Co. was approved for a renewed temporary use permit earlier this year. And in this case, the RFP process wasn't used because there was no competition. And through that, we're recommending the RFP, reference to the RFP process was removed from the policy. It no longer appears relevant. On the business license bylaw, I commented that we would plan to bring forward some recommendations to consider a change to the business license fee for cannabis retail, with a recommendation for a number of other planned changes to the business license bylaw. The fee is $3,250 as an annual fee, which was added to the business license bylaw in 2018. And the business license for all other uses, the business license fee is $110. There'll be some information in the report about what the fee is in other local governments nearby for comparison. Now, and then I just want to explain something about temporary use permits. The Local Government Act regulates the designation of temporary use permit areas and the approval process for TUPs. A TUP can be permitted for a maximum of 3-year period, and the applicant may apply to have the permit renewed for another 3 years. And that TUP can be renewed only once. This doesn't, however, prevent a local government from accepting a brand new application after that 6 years and issuing a new permit again. So this is often confused because the legislation talks about how the permit can only be renewed once, but it doesn't mean that there can't be a brand new application. And council can consider that on its own merits and has the discretion to approve or not approve. Sometimes the route the applicant would like to take and council would like to take is that, well, now you've tested it out, it's time to rezone. But it doesn't always, the council is not tied to that, that opinion. And with the expiry of the True Green Cannabis TUP less than a year from now, the owner has inquired to staff as to their options and has been advised that they may apply to rezone or they may apply for a new TUP. And with the zoning bylaw update project scheduled to begin in 2025, and because there are more than one cannabis retail stores operating in the village, a TUP may have advantages as it bridges the gap between expiry of the existing permit and adoption of zoning bylaw amendments, which may or may not normalize cannabis retail in the zone, but that's certainly something staff plans to bring forward for consideration. It's on our long list. So in the draft policy, the recommendation is to remove reference to the temporary use permit. It's just a repetition of the legislation, and by removing it, I think it could reduce any confusion about the limitations of temporary use permits that aren't there. So attached to this report is the council policy 9.5 showing where staff recommends changes, and the recommendation is that this policy is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Questions? Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, maybe I'll just give a bit of context to the story of cannabis retail in Cumberland. So we did try to create our own policies before cannabis was made legal, and that was a lot of work for staff. Like, we were anticipating that it would be legalized, but we also were kind of worried that it would be a bit of the Wild West. So we really wanted to put in our own policies and frameworks so that it was what the community wanted it to be. Limiting the number of stores was just one of the things, but how they would look and the security and all the other elements that we put into that. And that did take a lot of work. I think that took a lot of staff time. So I think it warranted the cost at the time. Now that it's legalized and now that it can be regulated by the federal government, I don't think that it warrants the same level of business licensing. I was going to ask, included in the business licensing for other retail is the liquor stores, the liquor retail. Is that at the same price as other businesses in town? The 110?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So to me, I think it should be, it's federally regulated by the same ministry. So it should, I'm happy with that being the same level of cost there. Moving forward, we don't have to do the same level of legislative change or bylaw. So yeah, I feel like that's a more fair cost, is to be similar to what other liquor stores would be regulated at or charged. Yeah. Thanks.
Did you want to go ahead?
Oh, go ahead.
The only thing I am wondering if we removed the RFP process, and one of the players bows out here, are we not kind of hobbling ourselves a little bit from selecting what would be a good fit for the community? I'm a little, and this is a contrived example. Let's say you get something that's more in line with what we have here. One goes out of business, then we got, tacky, something really tacky and not in keeping with the community character. We've removed our ability to select between those, or how would we hand out that license if there's more than one contender?
I think that if you do want to continue with an RFP process, we should have a look at further revisions to the policy, because it's not clear to staff how we undertake that process now, rather compared to how it was done originally. So if you do want to look at that, we absolutely can, and I think that we take that back and come back to you with kind of a new plan of how we would address that.
Thank you.
Just on the RFP process, I don't think that we should continue it. I think that from now forward, it would be a consumer choice, right? And that would sort of support, the village's idea of what kind of business they would want it to be. I think that would be more of a consumer choice rather than a council direction.
We also didn't use an RFP process for the new store that went in.
Right. No, I know
So it
that.
would be a
I'm
bit
just,
of a setup of,
how would we award it then? And out of curiosity, if we didn't go
well,
through.
there are only two, so when one of those licenses leaves, then whoever wants to apply for a business license would be welcome to apply for a business license. I don't think we have any control over that, like you say, without an RFP process.
Okay.
Councillor Therrien? Oh, Michelle, did you want to say
I'll
something?
just, I think you were mentioning, like, what if two came in or whatever, how would we choose? But likely, they wouldn't come in at the same time. Likely, if something went out of business, one would come in, maybe another one would come in a minute later, or something. They
Yeah.
wouldn't come in at the same time.
And it would
So
only be the two
It would
licenses.
just be the first one that came in.
Yeah, we only allow two.
Okay.
And so I guess one of my questions then is that is part of the policy that we only allow 2 licenses for cannabis retail in the village?
Yes, that's correct. It's there in the policy under number 2.4.
Okay.
Yeah, along with distances from other things and as well, I think, or distances from each other.
Okay. So then my question becomes so they're going to need to reapply for a temporary use permit, or rezone. What's the charge for a temporary use permit? How much do we charge for a new one of those?
Okay.
And what's the difference in cost for them between that and the rezoning?
Well, I'd really like to give you that answer, but my Wi-Fi is
Oops.
in and out. Let me see if I can find that for you. I just don't know off the top of my head. I don't think I can find that out for you the second because the Wi-Fi isn't working.
Okay. Is it
Can you? Okay, thank you.
okay? Because I'm just looking at it like we just had our police report here. They weren't even mentioned. They don't seem to be causing any problem in the village. They seem to be, a valuable member of our business community now with these stores. And yeah, between the $3,000 business license and then the costs of either rezoning or temporary use permits, it seems like quite a lot of onerous costs on a that business specifically, which seems a bit unfair to me. I'm guessing that we're not going to have our rezoning that follows our OCP in time before they need to reapply for this temporary use permit.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
By a year or something, right?
Yes.
By about a year.
I did get to the fees bylaw, actually. So $4,100 for a zoning bylaw amendment and
Yeah.
$2,500 for a temporary use permit.
Okay, yeah.
that's
So I
still
mean,
a
those
chunk
are
of change. Yeah.
both a bit pricey on top of the extra business license. So yeah, I'd like to see those business licenses come more in line with everybody else's business licenses, which I think should probably go up. Seem to be on the low end compared to a lot of places. They haven't moved in years, and inflation has certainly carried on, so they're due for a jump there. And I do like what I see in some of the other towns doing them on a square footage basis. So some of the bigger places pay a little bit more.
So, agreed with everything that's been said so far. Also, I think if we were looking at, and then I know this conversation has come up with the substance use strategy, in terms of how municipal governments can encourage or discourage substance use in their communities, and one of the ways we do that is by how many licenses we give out for liquor establishments or other substance use places, including probably coffee shops, because that's a substance too, caffeine, and we all need it. So, or some of us do anyway. So when we look at potentially having a scale on business licenses, I think if anything, we would have the liquor stores way, way up there, and we would have other uses much lower, because I think liquor has far more social and health consequences than anything else, except maybe sitting. So yeah, encouraging us to look at that mechanism a little bit, and as well as the square footage, I think also makes sense. I'm not sure what other considerations might go into that business license, but I agree it needs to be leveled out a bit, and that the baseline business license could come up a bit probably eventually. And that's all I'm going to say.
Courtney, is there an opportunity for them to come forward with rezoning before we've done our OCP?
A rezoning application?
Yeah.
Which yes, absolutely.
So that we wouldn't have to go through a TUP and a rezoning?
So if they applied for rezoning, it would only apply to their lot.
Yeah.
And they would do it instead of a TUP. But I think we would still have the same conversation during the zoning bylaw review.
And that conversation would be that cannabis use is one of the uses in VCMU1 zone. And so that wouldn't be specific to the site, but it would regularize and remove the need for a TUP.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking. And we've done some research. We're kind of squirreling away for the zoning bylaw review about what's the best way in what bylaw do we put the limit on to? And, could talk, should the limit stay at 2? It probably should be limited to some number. That seems very typical.
Yeah.
And also the buffer distance from other uses and from each other. So, trying to figure out, does that go in the zoning bylaw or does that go in the business license bylaw? But we'd recommend those things remain as a regulation. But yeah, not specific to the 2 sites or particular businesses, that it could change location over time within those parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And the bylaws, we're thinking the bylaws are going to happen in 2026.
Zoning bylaw review should begin in 2025. Yeah, would probably complete in 2026.
Okay.
Sorry if I was understanding what you're saying, but
Yeah.
we could still do both of those things. We could rezone just the lots that are currently being used for that purpose. And then when we are doing the OCP and then the zoning bylaw, we can rezone the entire VCM U1.
Yes, that's correct.
Allow for that purpose.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just with the timing of when the TUPs expire, I think what might happen is that for Stick and Stone, the zoning bylaw update could be complete or before their TUP expires. So, but that will not be the case for True Green. They will have to make an application to rezone their lot or TUP.
And staff aren't making like recommendation to them one way or the other. They're just saying these are the options.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
So, just along those lines, so I understand, if they go the cheaper option, $2,500, I think it is there, to do the TUP, would our changes in zoning use for VCMU1, they wouldn't have to worry about it. They could potentially save themselves whatever the greater cost of rezoning those
Yeah, they wouldn't have to rezone.
specific properties. They wouldn't have to rezone anymore.
Yeah.
So it seems like the TUP is still in their interest as
There's still a time
financially,
limit though
yeah.
on the TUP. So they would have to rezone.
Well, no, because we would, potentially through the OCP process, zone the downtown core to allow for those. That.
Oh,
that-
I see, yes,
As a permitted,
okay.
as
Yeah.
a
Right.
permitted use.
So then the
Added-
rezoning-
Added to the list of permitted uses.
Yeah.
Right.
And the business license updates, when do you expect those?
I can't say for certain, but I know that it's on the work program. And I believe the aim is to bring something to council later in 2024.
Okay, so that would be in time, so we could lower the business license fee, but they still have to do the TUP this year, but at least we're not double dinging them, those two big amounts.
Yeah, business licenses have already been renewed for 2024, so the aim would be to put in any new fees for 2025.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a recommendation there. Did you get what you needed from us in terms of feedback on the bylaw?
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
okay,
Yeah.
good. Just checking.
I'll recommend that council adopt amended council policy number 9.5, cannabis retail sales, and that council directs staff to consider a reduction in business license fees for cannabis retail so that they are consistent with similar businesses in the upcoming report, with recommendations for amendments to the business license bylaw number 896, 2009.
Second.
All in favor? And that's carried.
Oh, yeah, Sean.
Took a little longer than we thought.
There we go. Doubled it, Sean.
That's not what we wanted.
Okay, community priority issues for 2024 RCMP annual performance plan. So we had a list.
Yeah, that's not what's on.
Oh, whoops. Sorry.
Alternate approval process.
Skipped ahead.
Sorry. I didn't print my agenda and it's just messing me up trying to read two different documents at the same time. So, okay, so we voted for that. Okay. Alternative approval process for wastewater upgrade project loan. Rachel,
Okay, so
what's the terrible news?
I'm going to stand for this one. I think you've already had the bad news.
We already heard the bad news.
So council has given third reading to the bylaw for loan authorization to borrow an additional $2.5 million for the wastewater treatment plant project. And the bylaw has received approval of the Inspector of Municipalities. So the village can now proceed with the elector approval process, which is required for long-term borrowing. And council has directed that the village move forward with an alternate approval process. And this report outlines the requirements of what the final decisions that council needs to make, which are to establish the deadline for receiving elector responses, and that's the response form is how an elector indicates they're opposed to the borrowing. The second thing council has to do is to establish the elector response forms themselves and to make a fair determination of the total number of electors of the village for this process. So the village also must give notice to electors of this process going forward, and there is a draft notice in attached to your council report, which includes all the recommended dates and the numbers that we're going to talk about. If council approves everything tonight, staff would go ahead and publish that notice on May 1st and May 8th in the Comox Valley Record as a statutory notice. So the first step for council when decision making is the deadline for receiving elector responses, and that deadline must be at least 30 days after the publication of the notice the second time. Staff are recommending establishing the deadline at 4 p.m. on June 11th, which is a Tuesday in June, and 4 p.m. because that's when the office closes the doors for people to hand in their forms. The community charter does require at least 30 days for electors to submit those forms, and this having June 11th does add a few days because there is a weekend at the end. I think the last day ends up on a Saturday, so we move it to Monday, and I've added one more day just as a bit of a cushion on that. The second decision is the elector response form. There's a form attached to the report. They're drafted to allow a single elector response on each form, and once approved, forms will be available at the village office and on the website starting on May 1st, the date of the first publication of the notice, and council does have to approve that form. And you'll see on the form on the back there's information about elector eligibility, and the person completing the form makes a declaration that they are an elector and eligible to submit a form. The third decision is the total of number of electors, and staff is recommending that number to be 3,480 electors, and this number would form the basis of the 10% threshold of 348 as the number of response forms required to indicate opposition to the adoption of the bylaw. And the number 3,480 is made up of the number of resident electors, and we get that number from Elections BC, who's in the best position to give us that number. They have access to vital statistics and driver license info and address information. And that number of resident electors, so people that live in the village of Cumberland, you don't have to own property. Anyone that lives here, you don't even have to live in a residence, but you do have to live in the village. That number is 3,300 people as of March 20, which was the last draw of the voter list from the province. And the estimate of the non-resident electors is 180 people. We take that number from our tax rolls and pull all the non-resident owners, and we eliminate quite a few people from that list if they live out of province. They cannot submit a form. If, what are the other, the corporate owners aren't eligible. If there's a corporation or a business on a title, they can't submit a form, and only one owner of a property can submit a form. So if there's 2 or 3 owners, we remove the extras and just count the one, and that's how we get to the 180. So those are the 3 decisions. Happy to answer any questions, and I did include as an alternative, council can always add days to the 30 days, the date of June 11th. I wouldn't recommend going any less because it's already, you know, you can go a day less, but I wouldn't recommend it, but you can always add days to the end. So we'd like to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions, comments?
If I could just make a comment. There was a question that was asked recently about what happens if this is not approved. And so I'd like to just take a moment to basically answer that. I think, and I believe the general feeling here is that if this isn't approved, we will go to a full referendum to seek approval for this loan. Because completing the wastewater project at this time is the only option. We have to complete it or face massive fines. So then if that was failed, if the general referendum failed, we would be in a position where we would be tapping many of the reserves that we've saved over the years earmarked for other projects and that money would then be spent on the wastewater treatment plant as our only option at that point. Again, we are committed to building this to come into compliance.
Anybody else?
Yeah, same with Troy. I think we don't have any other options except to complete this plant. And doing the alternative approval process is the most timely way of getting this done. If council had better options, we'd definitely look at them, but we just don't. So I hope people do understand that. And a referendum is also very costly, which is why we found this route.
Anybody else?
I move the council give notice to the Village of Cumberland electors of the alternative approval process, establish the deadline for receiving elector responses as June 11th, 2024, establish the elector response form as presented in the staff report of April 4th, 2024, and make a fair determination of the total number of electors of the Village of Cumberland at 3,480 for the purposes of the alternative approval process for wastewater upgrade project loan authorization number 2, bylaw number 1207, 2024.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, now we're on Community Priority Issues 2024 RCMP Annual Performance Plan.
Okay, so this is just being brought back to you. It was on last council meeting as well, just to let you think about some priorities that you might want before the RCMP came to speak to you tonight. So tonight, then staff is just asking if you can outline your priorities for the year, and then we will communicate that with the RCMP. One thing I do want to mention after listening to the delegation, though, is that you might want to think about is, you know, in other years we've given crime reduction, but one thing he was talking about was different types of crime. If you're concerned about something going on in your community, you might want to ask that a priority be looked at for that. And that just struck me as something he was talking about, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And yeah, and so, thank you.
Okay, we get 5. So,
Have they ever community policed yet?
I mean, I think we can keep asking because we're gonna get a new inspector, and because they're gonna come and see the soapbox derby, and that is part of how we do, and they're doing the EV bike program, so maybe our persistence is having a small influence. And I think, like, doing stuff like that, like inviting them to come to things, that maybe that's the way we need to get community policing in our community, is to actually say, come, be at whatever event we're doing, right? And then they're building relationships that way. Yeah, so I don't know whether we want to think about a specific crime reduction, but I think we all still want the campground support out there in whatever
Especially
format
in the summer,
that
yes.
comes.
I thought the nighttime patrol was a good idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
very good idea.
Yeah, let's
So that's
do
part
that.
of the crime reduction and night patrols and things
Patrols,
like
like,
that.
yeah.
Because that's the one that we see all the time is,
Yeah.
oh, my car got broken into again last night. Right, it's the crime of opportunity of people just cruising around testing doors.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
What did we have before watercraft safety? Traffic and road safety.
well, we've always said speed, right?
Yeah, speeding is always a concern.
But I think if we say speed, what's worked in the past is we've said speed on this street or in this neighborhood. Otherwise, we just get the highway guys come in and sit at the four-way at 4th and Dunsmuir and ticket people for seatbelts or running the stop sign, which is also useful. People need to wear their seatbelts and stop at stop signs. But we have specific long straight roads that cause us issues. So if we do traffic safety, maybe we want to focus it around the school or, I don't know, particular neighborhoods. So do we want to name? Kendall?
Well, that one and
Cumberland?
this one, in front of the playground, in the park,
Yeah,
the
nobody
park
stop-
on Royston
nobody
Road.
does 30, yeah.
Because nobody does 30 on that one. They come down off
And
Boulder
it's
Hill
very
and they're
easy.
doing 50, 60 through there,
Yeah,
right up to the stop sign.
yeah. So in the park,
And
the
that's one I'd
village
like to
park
see.
zone
Yep.
The park zone and the school zone's probably good.
and the school zones, yeah.
And Kendall too. I think people are. That's a narrower street that
Oh,
is
I haven't heard
traditional.
anything
Just
from
gonna
them.
say,
Yeah,
dropped
it's
it
gotten
down
much-
to 30.
it's gotten better since that flashing light's gone on that one.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's good.
So that's, campground, speeding, late night patrols. Do we want to keep watercraft safety? I feel like we have to.
I think so. Yeah, I think that boat ramp could be visited a little bit more,
Yeah,
especially
and
in
there
the
was
summertime.
specific timing in maybe the staff recommendation. I can't remember where I saw that.
Haul out time at the end of the day.
Yeah, like there it is, yeah. So between noon and 6.
I'd even say later, between 4 and 7 or something like
Yeah.
that when people
Yeah,
are coming off.
4 to 7, 4 to 8.
Yeah, yeah, when people are coming out after all day, yeah. Yeah, and in terms of specific crimes, I mean, the violent crimes are the ones that jump out to me. So the assaults and sex offenses. Anybody else have a thought about that?
I mean, those are the worst crimes, but those, they respond to because they get reported. It's not something that you can patrol for or actively,
Yeah.
other than their already, other than their ongoing engagement with, these types of issues. Like I say, it's not something you can ask them to come and patrol for. So we just need our residents to be nice to each other.
Yeah,
And-
I bet those are known people, but,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. So, yeah, I think then it's just general, or traffic incidents. Traffic incidents is high, and, theft and property crime.
That give you what you need?
So those,
I
is that
believe
enough?
So, yeah, if Rachel is taking notes, I think, was she? Okay, then I got what I need. Thank you.
I'll move that council have identified its top 5 areas of concern for policing services for the 2024-2025 Comox Valley RCMP Annual Performance Plan.
Is that okay to do it like that? Not do the list? You've got the list? Okay. Okay. Request for support and partnership.
I think you might have missed
Did I miss something else?
Rob's update. Or was that-
No, that was just included
That was
as
just-
Oh,
background
okay.
for AAP.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Thank you for keeping me on track. Okay, so support and partnership for National Indigenous Peoples Day. Lucky we left that $1,000 behind, hey?
Yeah, so we've received a letter from Comox First Nation requesting financial support, but also partnership and in-kind support for the event. So definitely it aligns with council's strategic priorities. So staff are recommending that you approve their request for $1,000 in financial support. And then also that we also would like to work with Comox First Nation at a staff level and understand what our resources available are. They did mention something about a stage, and I remembered last year that wasn't possible, but we'll look at it again and see. We didn't have the right type of stage, or I can't quite remember.
Okay.
But anyway, I think we could sit down at a staff level and figure it out. And I also think that there'll be a few staff members that wouldn't mind volunteering or going there as part of their work day to volunteer. And so we'll look at that as well, and we'll be in touch with KFN to see what their needs are. So that's why my motion is quite vague in that area, so that it leaves a bit more flexibility for what their needs are as well, and see how we can match our resources to their needs.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a recommendation there.
I'd like to move that council approve a financial contribution, the amount of $1,000 to the Comox First Nation to support community celebration of National Indigenous Peoples Day, to be funded through the host community funds, and that staff or council direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2024 to 2028 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure, and that council direct staff to review operational resources and work plans and work with the Comox First Nation staff to provide in-kind support that is available through that review.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried as well. Now we are on to strategic priorities first quarter report. And I think we start with you, Michelle.
I normally don't have to speak this much anymore. Okay, so it was a busy quarter. There's some kind of key highlights that I just wanted to bring up, but also I believe starting on page 166 of the agenda is more detailed council strategic priorities that have comments and status updates as well. A couple highlights. We have the Lake Park Society has substantially completed their sleeping barrel installation, and there's a ribbon cutting on the 3rd, so they had a grant for that. That's pretty exciting. The waterfront restoration was also completed as well, the natural playground. A few other things, liked that we were able to complete the kitchen renovations over at the Buchanan Hall, so now we can rent it out and everyone can use the kitchen. That's kind of functional. There was the fire hall banquet, which went really well, and there was some awards given out. Lots of appreciation for the service that the firefighters give to the village. A few plans were completed. There's some work in the forest about some protection for some education classroom areas. We extended the Royston Water agreement for another few years, and then they're expected to go on their own water system. But and then we managed to do a restructure for a director team level of leadership for the village, and more information will start coming through for that as we go through that process. And finally, there's just been a lot of talk about the wastewater. I added like a full paragraph about our wastewater, the challenges that we've experienced, all the way from the heat dome to the atmospheric river. Those climate changes made the design team have to change some design to adapt to those changes. We've had, I don't know, I had to mention it. We found a old coal mine borehole in the middle of the lagoon when it got brought out. So that's, just those things take a lot of pivoting changes. Then we had the cost increases to do with COVID hit. We had cost increases that we're experiencing municipal wide. This project is no no exception. And really, just finally, I just want to talk about like this project is by far, I think by 4 times as much, the largest capital upgrade project that the village has ever undertaken. You know, so yeah, it's we're making it through. You know, staff is doing a really good job keeping it moving. We have a project manager, but it's a large undertaking for a village of our size. And then I just outline a bunch of grants that grant activities. We've had a few grants given to us. We've had, unfortunately, a couple of grants not approved. And then throughout, there's the financial services, which sounds like Councillor Therrien will have some questions on, and I think you might have mentioned, and then the protective services has some stats in there. We can answer some questions if you like. Police already came to talk to you. They outline their stats, and development and bylaw services has stats in their reports as well as we have a council resolution list that talks about what's been completed and what's in process still. And so we can answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Who wants to start?
I can start. Most of my questions, as I go down this list, my question is much the same for a lot of them. I'm just looking for timelines on some of the overdue items that were, and the behind on items that were, that are highlighted here. And I understand, you know, the reasoning behind them, and I appreciate all the hard work staff is doing on all of these things, but I'm just trying to get an idea of some timelines so we know when we can expect some stuff.
So when you do the chart, do you move those bars as they go? So is that now the accurate timeline, or is that the previous?
No, that's correct. Staff update, whether like how far along percentage-wise they're and obviously if they have a date that is December 31st, 2023, it'll be overdue, and it just means we're carrying it through, and we have to take. So it will show complete before the end of the year, you know, or when it's completed. It's just it didn't get done by the actual deadline. Yep. Anything behind, yes, staff is. You'll notice a lot of it is to do with the wastewater and or even I believe maybe the OCP, because the timelines have actually been changed and come to council. Yeah. But we don't change any deadlines or timelines unless we come to you and you know, we're to get a resolution. But it's for the best is to just be actuals and show you how things, because a lot of times it'll be an emerging item, like the complete communities was an emerging item. Well, we want you to see how those types of things play out. And I can find out a few of the completion. I think most of them are entered in the comments when we expect to complete them. I didn't see it for the...
So the IT solution for the development approvals process just says it'll carry over into 2024, but do we know how far? Or when that one is?
Yeah, I can tell you that we are actively working on that one. So I'll make sure to put an estimated timeline in the next quarterly report. I think the way things are looking right now, we should have that wrapped up over the summer.
Okay. And then that's going to be an online, people are going to be able to track their development permits online, and other people can go and see what's going on online and things like that. Is that the gist of that whole project?
Right now, we're understanding that is the gist of it. The focus is on applicants having an electronic application system to make their applications and to check in on the status of their applications. And we're running into some hiccups with the public side, like what information the public is going to be able to see about active development applications. So I will need to get back to you with more details about what that will look like.
Okay. while you're here. I notice we lost the REDIP funding on that one. What is, how's that going to affect our work plans out there?
Yeah, we are going to have to regroup and get back to you on that. We do have a budget for that project over the next 5 years, so we do have some options to fund the work that we didn't get the grant for. But also, there's another intake coming up in the next few months for the grant. I have a debrief with REDIP scheduled, I think, this week or next week. So a few things there.
Okay. Is the Arts and Culture Master Plan yours too? No. Nope.
Yeah, sure.
That one is, and that one is.
So I think the question is an update on plans for that?
Yeah, when
Yeah.
can we expect?
Yeah, I'm planning to bring a report to council, hopefully in the next couple meetings. As I've come back from leave and evaluating where I think some priorities, this would be an example of where we'll present an option for council to perhaps reprioritize some things just based on some other community needs and timing. So that report would lay out some options for council, and one option very well could be to reinitiate that, but there's some other options, still keeping that as a priority within your term, or the 4 years of the strategic plan, but also looking at the cultural planning side of it, as well as taking into account where we're at in that broader facilities planning, of which that was really a key focus of that. So more information, planning, plan to come in the very near future.
Thank you. Got more?
Transportation Master Plan.
Do you have any other
this one, the active travel plan part of it. Largely, this has been taken over by the CVRD now.
Is this the Courtney to Cumberland connector?
Yeah.
Courtney to Cumberland connector?
Yeah.
Rob will come up and.
Defer to defer to defer.
Sorry.
I haven't actually attended any of the meetings, but I do know, like, the CVRD is leading the process with Courtney and Cumberland involved and other stakeholders like the Ministry of Transportation. So it's.
I chatted to James briefly on the sidelines of our last meeting just about it. The budget for that now has gone over $10 million, and he's suggesting it could take up to 20 years, just because of funding implications. There not being any, for the most part. So I'm wondering if we should start looking again at ways that we can more cheaply just at least get ourselves to the edges of Cumberland with bike trails that don't use the connector. I don't know. It's something we may have to reconsider.
Mm-hmm. And then I know the ministry does have, we actually got a BC One call for locates in and around the interchange. So I know they are starting to look at potentially some safety improvements in and around the interchange with traffic, vehicular, probably cyclists, but I don't know what that looks like. So.
Yeah, he met the Modi representative, mentioned that in the meeting we had, and he said he wouldn't know exactly what they're going to do for some time. So I don't think that's our quick solution.
I don't think there is a quick solution, but.
No. But while you're up here, Rob, I have
Yes.
a question. So under the launch stage 3 LWMP, the liquid waste management plan, which happens after we build the wastewater project, it says waiting on a memorandum. What's my question? I just don't understand you put some stuff in there that I don't really understand. Can you just explain what that process looks like?
And unfortunately, I don't fully understand it either, because we're still trying to finalize what it's going to look like. So Paul is working on putting a plan together, and it's multifaceted. There's a lot of pieces to it, And we have actually some conversations with the Minister of Environment tomorrow, I think, that'll help kind of guide that process as well.
So this is just about us trying to get our reed bed tested as part of that process, or included
think-
in that process?
I think the plan along has always been to not include it as part of the
Okay.
ministry approval process. So it's treatment outside of that process. We like to continue down that road, but we also want to, as we discussed a few weeks ago with Comox First Nations, we like to construct some of this works now. And actually put it online and then do it at a trial period. And that was kind of always the plan. And then develop the final stage 3 LWMP from that.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. That
All right.
does help me a little bit. Anybody else have questions?
I did have one for Annie or two. Where did it go?
The financials.
Yeah. Thanks, Annie.
Firstly, thank you again for your notes. And also the purchasing and the purchasing information and the social procurements benefits that are included in there. That's awesome.
I just had a question on page 185. Our municipal position, it shows our operating funds down to $522,000 from a little over 2 million. Is that just because we haven't collected taxes yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that should resolve in June, yeah.
So that number should come back up to a more
Yeah.
normal and historic level
Probably higher,
this summer?
yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Cyclical.
On which other one was page 215? Was that you again? My notes are all just in order of how they were on the thing, but it jumps from person to person. Where did 250? Oh no, that's the next report. Okay.
I think that's planning.
Hmm?
216.
Okay.
Any more financial?
No, that was really the only one, the number that jumped out at me as I was looking at it. And, I mean, a lot of the numbers are gonna go down as we pour money into the wastewater treatment center, but yes. Yep.
So I just have a question about the bylaw services summary notes, which are excellent. And I'm wondering if we can include comparison years so we can track changes. So in the chart on page 204, if we had the previous year, I don't know, previous year total even, or something like that.
Yep, that's possible.
And we could just see where those trends go.
So, yeah. I see. So the quarter one for 2024 and 2023, you'd like to see something like that.
Yeah, I mean, as far back as it's easy to gather that information, because I think it does demonstrate a trend.
Yeah.
It will.
Sure. Are you saying more than 1 year back or just comparison year over year?
I'd love to see more than 1 year, but I don't know how difficult that is, so if it
Sure.
takes too long, then
Yeah,
sure
we'll
that's what I-
definitely be able to compare year over year, and then we'll see what else we can manage. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And the dog calls, so there's dog calls, there's dog warnings, there's dogs at large, and there's dog attacks, and then there's other animal complaints. I'm just wondering what the difference between dog calls and all the other dog things are.
Okay.
Your favorite topic.
So, the first thing, as I learn about the bylaw department and ask questions of our bylaw officer about these stats, is that it's not perfect, but it's how we've been doing it for years, so we can compare over time. Dog call, like, so for example, I can tell you, so dog attack 12. It does not mean there have been 12 dog attacks. It means there have been 12 calls for service into the dog attack category. So it could be 4 people calling about the same incident, and that counts as 4.
Right.
And I can also tell you that it's an imperfect science to categorize these things, and what is just a dog call, and what is a dog attack call before the investigation has been done. But so maybe the important thing is that there are, in fact, a small number of sort of ongoing addresses where we get calls about dogs, 2 or 3, and that's represented by all these numbers that you see here.
Okay. Yeah, and potentially that 20 dog calls, some of them may end up being other things, but we don't know at this point. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, thank you for trying to, thank you.
Well, I've got Courtney here. Can I get you to switch hats again?
Okay.
I noticed that Beck Avenue, there's, that's just on a maintenance. So I'm assuming that those 6-lot industrial, that's the new phase 2?
That's the initial subdivision, the
Or is
first
that
one.
still the initial subdivision? They haven't proceeded with anything for,
That's right. We did actually receive their new subdivision application, but in April, so it does not reflect it in this first quarter report.
okay.
So just in the last few weeks.
And am I correct in assuming that one is going to need a sewer system then to proceed with that second phase?
They're proposing on-site again for the second phase.
Okay.
But with the like retrofit ready for the sewer.
I see. And then I guess the follow-up question to that is the report on the long-term costing and things out there, is that report still, what's the timeline for that one?
I would like to get back to you on that.
Okay.
On the timeline for that report.
Is that coming as part of the Complete Communities?
That's
or-
right. It's part of the same contract as the Complete Communities.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say the wrong thing because I know we've got a couple different grant deadlines because it's 2 different grants. I know the Complete Communities portion has to be done by August, but I can't recall what we have in our contract for that fiscal analysis portion because that funding deadline is later.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we just need a motion to receive that report.
So moved.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. And property tax,
I'll move.
2024 property tax rates bylaw.
Are we just passing it?
No.
All right, so the purpose of this report is to provide council the 2024 property tax rates bylaw for consideration of first, second, and third reading. Every year, the financial plan bylaw must be adopted prior to the adoption of the tax rates bylaw before May 15th. The approved 5-year financial plan requires municipal property tax revenue in the amount of 4.26 million for 2024, and property tax revenue levied in 2023 total just under 4 million, inclusive of 2023 growth taxes. This represents a 7.52% increase from 2023. The tax rate bylaw established establishes the tax rates for the village and other government agencies for which the village levies and collect taxes, such as the CVRD, the Regional Hospital District, and the Vancouver Island Library. The variable tax rate system in BC levies property tax to owners based on the value of their properties, and the assessed value are established and reviewed by BC Assessment each year. The tax rates are based on the revenue required and included in the village budget and the assessed value of all the properties in the village at that time. Changes in the total assessed property values in the village will cause the tax rate to change. And now the market changes. So the total market value in 2024 assessments for Cumberland decreased by 5.64%, although the changes varies significantly amongst the different property classes. Residential properties present an average decrease of 6.4%, while business class shows an increase of 1.43% and light industry an increase of just under 7%. A BC assessment published that for 2024, homeowners throughout Vancouver Island will generally see a change in assessed value in the range of -5% to +5%. And now the taxes collected on behalf of other authorities. So as mentioned previously, the village must establish the rates to collect taxes on behalf of the Vancouver Island Regional Library, CVRD, and the Regional Hospital District. The tax rates for the library are based on the invoiced amount to the village by the library board as per the adopted financial plan and present a significant variance of 19% compared to 2023. The tax rate for CVRD and the Regional Hospital District are based on amounts requisitioned per the respective adopted financial plan. The CVRD requisition for 2024 is higher than 2023 by $90,000 or 8.4%, of which $35,000 is for the Regional Emergency Service, previously invoiced as a separate program and now included in the annual requisition. The 2024 requisition also includes significant increase compared to 2023 for the recreation complexes and the transit services. And finally, the requisition for the Regional Hospital District came in a little lower than estimated, with a reduction of 2.3% compared to 2023. Now the growth taxes. So property taxes generated by growth in 2024 are estimated at just about $157,500, and the new taxes related to residential growth are estimated at $73,800. An amendment to the approved 2024 financial plan will be brought forward at a later date to contribute this amount to the Emergency and Public Safety Reserve to save towards future policing costs per council reserve and surplus policy. Now the new growth taxes are also estimated for other classes for a total of just under $74,000. It includes a significant increase estimated at $90,000 for the business class due to the development of Bevan Road and the reclassification of a property from residential to business class. It also includes a reduction estimated at $34,000 for managed forests due to the BC assessment methodology to account for timber harvesting, which reduces the value of a property 2 years later. So now this new growth taxes from property classes other than residential provide council with different options. So first, council can choose to contribute the new growth tax to the Regional Financial Stabilization Reserve to stabilize tax revenue increase in future years. This is the recommended option included in the attached tax rates bylaw, since minimal feedback from the public was received during the budget consultation, and which led staff to conclude to a general public acceptance of the 2024 budget and tax revenue increase of 7.52%. This option also provides more flexibility to council during the 2025 budget discussion and allowed to use the additional revenues to stabilize future year tax increases. Now, a second option is to use a new growth tax to reduce the tax rate increase by 2% for all property classes from the budgeted 7.52% to a 5.52% tax increase. This represents a reduction of about $36 for a single-family home and $85 for an average commercial property. I should be noted that any reduction to the approved tax revenue for the 2024 budget will impact the other 5 year of the approved financial plan, and future increases would have to be considered for the year 2025 to 2028 to maintain the same level of revenue required to cover for the operating expenses and project included in the 5-year plan. And now the third option is to use the new growth taxes to reduce the tax rate for light industry and business. In this scenario, an average commercial property would see a significant decrease of about $463 in the municipal taxes. In this scenario, the commercial ratio is reduced from 3 to 2.74. Something to point out is that the commercial ratio set at 3 for Cumberland in 2023 is amongst the lowest on the island. That means that proportionally, village businesses pay less taxes than other businesses on the island. This scenario would further decrease the commercial ratio for the village. And finally, there's scenario 4 and 5, also included in the report, who present a variation of scenario 2 and 3, and proposes a reduction in the tax rate of 1% from 7.52 to 6.52, and a contribution of about $31,000 to reserve for future year stabilization of tax revenue increase. So each scenario is detailed in the report, included on page 214 of the agenda, and a comparative table is included on page 219. Estimated taxes and charges for an average property is provided for reference only and will vary depending on the change in assessment value for each individual property. So finally, if council chooses an option different than proposed option 1 to contribute new growth taxes other than residential class to reserve, staff recommends scheduling a special council meeting on May 6th before the committee of the whole to consider readings of the revised bylaw with final adoption scheduled for the May 13 regular meeting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions, anybody? I have one just to, while people are thinking about it. So that those, the almost $74,000 in growth taxes, you mentioned if we spread that out, it would mean what per household? $30, $32?
$36 per single home, yeah.
Right. And could we take that money and put it in, say, our affordable housing reserve?
I guess, I mean, it's up to council where they want to put that money. I mean, because it's taxation money, it kind of makes sense to put it towards a future taxation. But if council has other ideas, it could be considered for sure.
Because we don't have a mechanism yet to be adding money there, and we are clearly in need of affordable housing. So that was a thought.
One choice you could do is just pass the bylaw as is then,
decide
and
what to do
then
with it.
yeah, and then it would just you could say go to stabilization or whatever, and then in the 2025 financial planning process, you could direct staff to think about that kind, like any other kind of initiative as well.
I'm in support of the first option to continue as we are with the tax rate and put it toward reserves. We know that we're using a lot of our reserves and will continue to need to do that with our capital projects, and so, yeah, I support option 1.
Likewise.
There's a motion.
Yeah, I also support option 1. I think $36 saving over per household is not really going to make a lot of difference, and it will give us quite a bit more flexibility next year. And the residential new taxes go straight to protective services already, don't they?
It does, yeah.
To that, yeah. Just an odd question though, on page 215, the two numbers don't add up to $157,000. So I'm just wondering if that's
Oh, it might be some rounding.
if that's just a typo or which way that goes. Okay. All right. Yeah, but I'm in favor of number 1.
Okay, there's a recommendation there, I think.
I'll move that council give first, second, and third reading to 2024 property tax rates bylaw number 1209, 2024.
Second.
All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Annie. Is that it? That's it. Okay, so notices, motions, and announcements. Please do check the website to make sure these things are happening at the time I'm telling you they're happening, because things change in the world. Advisory Planning Commission is scheduled for April 25th at 4 p.m. in council chambers, and Committee of the Whole is scheduled for May 6th at 5:30 in council chambers. And questions? Do you have
I just wanted to let you know, Mayor Brown, that because of the technical difficulties, I can't connect to the email server.
Oh.
So email questions can't be presented, but I think we could have staff answer them in the meantime.
Follow
and
up.
perhaps put them in the council package reader this Friday.
Okay, great.
that
Thank
cool?
you. So apologies, technical issues will not allow online questions, but we do have a community member in the audience. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Are you referring to me?
Yes.
Just a point of note, these chairs make you not want to come to a council meeting.
Are they not?
Piece of wood with some cloth on it.
Yeah.
Is it all right if I just stand?
Yes, use the mic there so
Okay.
so the people at home can hear you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question of you. The question I have tonight relates to the agenda item about borrowing $2.5 million to complete the wastewater treatment plant. And my question is, how will borrowing additional monies, because it does note additional, affect the operations or other projects that may come out of the Transportation Master Plan, the official community plan, and I'm specifically referring to the sidewalk network. I had to drive here because I don't want to walk home on a street with no sidewalks and a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. And it also relates to the Inclusiveness and Accessibility Committee, which I would like to take part. So that's just my question. How long is it going to be before we actually get sidewalks on Ulverston, or at least on one side? Or will borrowing all this money mean that operationally it's 5 to 10 years out into the future? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So what I will say is that we have different reserves and different pools of money for different types of projects. The borrowing we're doing is obviously specific to wastewater, so that aside from the capacity that it takes to build the wastewater and manage that project, doesn't have implications for other projects in the village. It's a different pool of money, so it will impact your parcel tax, but it will not as far as I understand, impact the outcomes of the master transportation plan or the active travel plan. That all those projects that come out of that plan will need to likely be funded long-term. So they would come through linear asset reserves or they would come through grants from the village. And Rob, you're welcome to add something if I missed anything.
I think you covered it.
Can I respond? Sure. Something. I think part of the danger if we don't borrow this money for that particular problem is we might have to go into our other reserves, which would leave us nothing for things like sidewalks. The ability of DFO to levy fines of up to $1 million a day would just be money thrown out completely. It would that wouldn't get us anywhere, and so by borrowing this additional money to complete the sewage treatment plant, I think we're actually protecting those linear asset reserves, which is, along the lines of your concern. Does that make sense?
Do I get to respond? I'm not sure if I can respond or not.
Sure.
I understand the need for the wastewater treatment plant. I took part in the committee that came up with the plan. But my concern is, and it relates to other sources of funds and also to the emissions reduction plan and the accessibility and inclusion committee, that pedestrians don't seem to be included or thought of. I have got a response from my letter to yourselves through Rob Crisfield that essentially there's no money to do sidewalks. And my suggestion is, if there is no money to do sidewalks, please get the speed limit lowered to 30.
And we are working on that. Just like Rob's email said, there is money for particular sidewalks in future plans, in future budgets, and we have to carefully budget out how we do that work based on the income we have, the very small tax base we have. And, sorry, I lost my train of thought. And what was the second part of your? Oh, and the speed limits are being considered through the master transportation plan. So all that work is underway. We also have a lot of value and hard work being done at the accessibility committee. We just don't have the tax base to do all of the things to make this community entirely accessible, or to put a sidewalk on every single street, or to have active travel on every single street. This community was designed at a time where there were not cars, and now we have had to adapt to having vehicles on streets and parking on streets that were not built for that, and it's an ongoing challenge to manage the infrastructure of the village. And I'm sorry it's not fast enough, but we are doing everything we can to speed it up. Thanks. Okay, so that's it. Motion to close. Please.
I'll move the council close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter to consider labor relations and other employee relations.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?